Yes, please.
So, Mr. Chair.
Sorry.
Yes, sir.
In thinking about this thing, and honestly, I haven't poured over it in detail. I know it's going to be a lengthy discussion. My thoughts are, this is my personal thoughts, and
point of order, Commissioner. Are you speaking to the approval of the agenda?
oh, I'm sorry, you're right. I'm sorry about
And you can.
Yeah. I was hoping that's what it was doing.
You can simply do it by consent, if there's no objection.
If there's no objection to the agenda as it stands. Go ahead, Michael.
So, just my
New business.
My two thoughts are new business. On new business, item 5A on our agenda at 6:12 and 37 seconds p.m. or what have you. My thoughts are twofold. One, when we
And I'm writing notes, so
when we do our work, I think, in my opinion, what I see coming out of this is we need to focus on a political, philosophical relationship between the PRC and the BPD, and the PRC and the City Council, and the BPD and the City Council. And then I think the second one, and this is above my pay grade, dealing with because some commissioners mentioned at the last meeting, I believe it, anyway, about the legality, some of the legal issues that might be involved in this. And might we also suggest, that's the point I want to make, may I also suggest, Chair, it's not a proposal, I think that maybe we can run this like a workshop so that Chief Greenwood can just interject at any time, with comment without being called upon or have to raise his hand or something. Just conduct like a workshop. So that's my thoughts on that.
Hola. What's that? But we can certainly, so what I hear, you agree with Commissioner Allamby to dispense of the rules of procedure so we could have a conversation instead of just, so yeah, it's subcommittee should work that way. And I probably will make it better when and if we get members of the community so they can also, we can have a discourse. So focus on relationships, on legality, and you have some legality concerns. Possibly.
Well, no, I don't. I think that was right. I'm not a lawyer, but I think it was Commissioner Roberts raised legality issues, and certainly there are legality issues. I mean, yeah, with our own ordinance as it is now, how we work, and meet and confer, et cetera. Obviously, there's legality issues about this, as a specific commissioner mentioned at the last meeting. I think it was straight up.
The originals, any first thoughts, Commissioner Allamby?
Well, I wanted to be clear as to who the chief is reporting to, because I don't think we have the authority to be the chief's supervisor, his manager, or any of that, and I don't think that's appropriate for us to be trying to move into an area that, we don't have the qualifications for. So I just want to be that we get that straight, because when we read the document, it's like, it's so vague, it's like, who's supposed to be running this shit? So we need to kind of tie all this in.
Yeah, so chief reporting to who manages the chief, what is the structure, of reporting?
Mm-hmm.
So I know that there are three things, if we read the new business discussion and from the making of the motion, we've been asked to evaluate the proposal, to possibly create a new one, and to look into possibly adjusting the current ordinance. Those are the three things that the motion, evaluate the proposal, the ordinance proposal, possibly look at this ordinance and create a new one based on this one as a template. And the third one is to look at the current ordinance and see which adjustments can be made to the current ordinance as a second viability, as a third possibility.
The core ordinance would be 4644-NS, the one that created it.
The one that created it, yes. I have to say that my concerns with this is we have to be clear that there can't be, in this discussion, I hope we can not worry ourselves with the concerns of whether the police department is going to have big concerns about changes in policies and procedures as it relates to community, as it relates to progressive policy changes. Because I don't agree with this proposal as it stands right now. I intend to go against it because I think that it's wrong in a lot of different places. But what it tries to do at some level is to move the police review commission in the direction that it should move sooner or later. How they're getting there, the things they're putting in place might not be what I agree to. I don't agree that the commission should have the power to fire the chief. I don't agree with that. I agree that if the commission has a concern about the chief, and you can see there some of the red changes that I make, it says that we should refer that to city council if we have some concerns about the chief performance. But we are not, I agree with the fact that everybody would have to be either a lawyer, a labor person, an HR person on that board in order to understand the subtleties of what it takes to deal with employment issues. And we, in my concern also, is that we see the whims of how this commission can change, and to have someone not only be answerable, but to be at the whim of those changes. If the person does not completely agree with all the changes, it's I don't know. To me, it could create an environment in which it could be used the wrong way.
The original way.
Yes. So I mean, so on the wording that I changed, I changed some of the wording there. So we know that that's, so I do not approve of this ordinance as it's written. I mean, I have concerns of the definitions right off the bat. They are extremely aggressive, and there some of them are even wrong. I had a conversation with the investigator today, and we're all members of NACO, the National Association of Civilian Oversight and Law Enforcement. And we agree, and actually reach out to Cameron, which is a board member for NACO, and we don't think that NACO would have written this ordinance. I think they would have written something about changes on more oversight and transparency, but they wouldn't have written this ordinance. I think the definitions are all over the place. I think that it's an overreach of power, and even the structure of how people are selected to be in the commission.
Yeah, and it just seems to, something is behind this, and I don't know what it is right away, but I would love to know.
Oh, I tell you what it is. It's
This is just too,
it's
biased,
you know. It is saying we know. It's indirectly trying to say police departments need more community oversight in order for them to perform their duties in a manner that's transparent and answers to the community. That's what they're indirectly trying to say. But what they're saying is, we believe that the Berkeley Police Department is a department who engages on a regular basis in improper behavior, so we're going to put things in place that are going to stop them from the improper behavior. And by saying that indirectly, the way that it's written and what they're putting in here, it doesn't open to the kind of conversation that is unbiased.
If I could add to that, I think what you were monologuing about here, gets to my point.
It was a monologue, true.
No, that it was, that we're looking at a political, philosophical issue here. And, you know, if you look at the history of the PRC going back to the original ordinance was established at a very tumultuous time here in Berkeley. And I'm not saying it was meant to be vindictive and to get the police kind of thing, but it was in response to the Vietnam War protests and the People's Park and all the stuff that was going on. Over the decades, and certainly since I've been on it, it's been, I think I may be outreaching here, George, you've been here long, and I see you agree with this. I think there has been an evolution since '73, and certainly since time I've on it, of more that we're in a partnership with the police. That we may not agree on everything they say or do, but we are in a partnership and we have a common interest of doing the best for the citizens of Berkeley. I agree with you, what I see this thing, just from what I read in the general tone of it, it goes back into an attack of police, polarizing kind of thing. So I would like to see us, whatever we decide to do, work, come up with a document or word it in such a way that gets the message to everyone that, you can call it chicken or egg. Is the Berkeley Police Department the department is because of the PRC, or is the PRC where we are because of the Berkeley Police Department? Well, I think, we're here, we have disagreements, but we have a broader goal, which is the betterment for our city, for our cops, and for our people.
But let's be fair.
That's what I'm
But let's be fair to these folks.
What?
There's some issues here that we've been trying to resolve
Oh,
for 10,
I
15
know
years.
that.
120
Just
to a
how you-
year.
No, absolutely.
Yeah.
Dude, absolutely, but I'm saying,
This is
how
a
you
result.
present it.
But this is
And
a
this thing
result
goes a
of
little bit-
frustration as well,
Mhm.
of negating the changes done in the city manager or city
I
council.
get that.
So, so we have to validate that progressive policing measures, which some of them are here, are adequate. What we need to measure is how those are implemented and whether their choice of creation of the commission and the powers that it has is the right way to do it. I mean, but I am not against what it kind of offers. I think there's some positive things here. It's just the delivery and what it's creating in order to affect that change might not be the right venue and vehicle, right? So, for our discussion, because we are limited in time in how effective, on the 27th of this month, the city council on the consent calendar for item 14 and 15, this is there.
Right.
So I intend to present myself on the 14th and 15th and say why I think that this measure should not be adopted, or that there is, I'm intend to tell them that it was an outside process that created this, and members of the PRC did not, or participatory, or did not include the commission, that the commission hasn't had the chance to look at this and vet it as it relates to the direction that, and that we're working on the process that we will present something with community input, in the open, transparent, on the record, with participation by the police department, in which we can talk about the changes that we can make.
If I could do one more thing, excuse me.
Sure.
That I think gets to the important part, our timeline. We are on a very short timeline.
That's right.
I don't know what we can complete in the time that we have to get to city council. So at a minimum, we maybe by the end of tonight, or certainly the next meeting, we want to come up with, be prepared to say to city council, however we want to word it, on first glance, we oppose this, but we support its concept. Please allow us until April, May, June, July to finalize our work and make a recommendation to the city council on it, something of that nature. I think we need to really
If you do go that route, I recommend that you request from them the original time frame that they set, that you all come up with some sort of proposal and submit it to them no later than May.
Okay, so we already have that?
Yes, it's in
Yes,
the original
it's in the original. that we
referral
never-
from the city council.
Yeah.
So,
Okay,
because they're operating on the election calendar.
Mhm.
They have
Oh,
to get
okay.
these measures approved by a certain deadline, and I think it's July. It's August actually, but their final meeting is in July, so they need to get all of that done in time for the November.
So maybe by the second Tuesday in May, right?
So we have till May, basically we have.
But the
till May.
second
Oh, okay.
Tuesday
The
in May.
The resolution says May 2018.
Why
We
do they have
can find out later
Yeah.
whether that's the.
Why is this on the agenda for the 27th then? I mean,
Because members of city council that are sponsoring this wanted what?
Councilmember Worthing to put it on the agenda.
That's right. and it has the support of a couple other city council members.
I just saw his name was on there.
Yeah.
So let me ask
So to
why
vote,
is it on the
on
council?
consent to vote on, to put this on the ballot, basically. Right?
Yeah,
That's my understanding.
that's what it is.
Okay, so then
These are
we
the first
need
steps.
something from this committee to say that we have, you gave us till May or whatever it was. Please do,
Okay, well, then
please do
let's
not
solve
vote
that.
on
Well,
this
let's
at
solve
this
that.
time and let us.
But let's solve that really quickly. Are we in agreement that we would like to say to city council, I mean, we need time
Yes,
to look at this until May 2018 and make either a counter proposal to the current ordinance proposal or to present changes to the city to the current ordinance that operates.
I would suggest you make a motion to that effect.
You have an opinion, Mr.? Yeah, go ahead, please.
I just wanted to make sure I understood. So were you suggesting to recommend to council that they alter the original time frame or just adhere to it?
Not to adhere to it,
Okay, so
but
just
not to vote. Remember, this is
Yes.
in consent. So we're in agreement that we're gonna say to city council, do not vote on this item, pull this item out of consent.
Yes.
Do the table this consent item, and to wait for the subcommittee, which is being created, for us to make a proposal, whether there is an ordinance change,
Right.
and to our current ordinance, or whether there's a counter proposal to this proposal, so that we can present to city council on the timeline that has been given, which is May 2018.
Well, I think that, I think that's our first order of business. I think we ought to put it in the form of a motion so it makes it official.
So I would suggest it be, obviously it's gonna be a recommendation to the full commission for them to take formal.
Yes. Which
a
is 3
formal
days.
recommendation
but
to the council.
Our
So,
next meeting's the 28th.
28.
We can't get it to that.
the agenda hasn't gone out yet. It's gonna go out,
No, but city council meets the day before.
oh,
That's right.
yeah, we can't.
So what
You
can
can
we
pull
do?
it off.
What can we do? Can we vote, can we vote on that as a subcommittee?
You know, I am
Can we vote
the
as city
chair.
council?
No,
I am the chair of the subcommittee. I don't need permission of the chair of the commission to speak on behalf of the subcommittee, do I?
No.
Like,
I think you can speak on behalf
On
of
behalf of the
yourself.
subcommittee.
yeah, I mean, so I can say that I'm a member of a subcommittee that's been forming the PRC to look into this issue. I mean, you know, and we're working towards the 2018 May date for completion of either,
Right.
And I think,
but yeah, that's right, but I can say I'm not speaking on behalf of the commission.
I think it'd be also very important in the political scheme of things if you mention the fact that the reason you are speaking into this item as the chair of the subcommittee is that it went before the city council, before the police review commission had a chance to look on it as a whole, and that's why you're speaking, not for the whole police review commission, but for the subcommittee.
Yeah, I mean,
Very important to put that on the record.
I can't say that though, so we
No,
know.
but I think it's
The
important. to be on the record.
motion should be now is to forward to the subcommittee, to the full commissioner. I mean, but that's gonna be on their subcommittee reports.
Yeah.
So, on their subcommittee reports, is that we are telling them that we intend, unless we want, this proposal doesn't come from the PRC, even though 3 members of the PRC are obvious members of this.
So make the
Which
distinction.
we did.
That's what we need to make
So,
the distinction.
But
I don't
because,
think people.
but it's not the
think
work of the
PRC.
PRC,
I know.
so we cannot say to the PRC that they suspend anything, because it's not the work of the PRC. I mean, so all we can say is, in the subcommittee report, that our intention is to work on, and we'll decide what we're gonna work on, to the target date of May 2019. So that's why we need to figure out which date on 2018 is, because if there's a meeting on the PRC, we'll work against that date backwards to figure it out. So it might be that we might have 4 weeks to do this only.
Wait, I'm sorry, when is the item on that Worthington put on? The
27th.
27th.
Next
Maybe
week. Next week.
Next week.
Oh my God.
28th.
See, they've been working on this and we were in a total dark. So they've probably been doing this maybe since
Oh,
October or however long. We don't know who these people are,
They'll be meeting with
what
city
their
council
intentions
members.
are, but it's obvious, you know, this is just something that's just not right.
They'll be meeting with 5 city council members individually.
Wow.
You know that. Independently, groups independently have met probably with Sophie Han and Harry and Kate Harrison and maybe the mayor and definitely I don't know about Ben Bartlett. I don't know whether they're met with Ben or not. I don't think they have, but I think they've met with Councilwoman Harrison, Councilwoman Sophie Han, probably Chris Worthington, and probably the mayor. So maybe 4 out of those members have met with people that, I'm not saying that the city council members have been part of the generating of this information, but that they have met with them. I mean, it's an obvious
What we
thing.
learned that these are.
And which is Davila, and definitely City Councilwoman Davila, which is the person who appointed Commissioner Pritchett. So if we believe that those 3 commissioners have been part of this process, then we have to maybe infer that those 3 members of the commission have met with their respective city council members. Yes, sir.
I have a question. So November 14th, 2017, council referred to the city manager and the PRC to review the existing legislation, rules, and regulations for the PRC and to consider all the options, including charter amendments, ballot measures, and any other amendments to strengthen the authority of the PRC to consider and act on citizen complaints. I'm just reading this. So it goes on to say, direct the city manager through the city attorney to provide a legal analysis of which proposals could be completed legislatively and which require amendments to the city charter. And then changes the city manager and the PRC should consider, but not be limited to, include the following. 1, use the preponderance of evidence as a standard proof for all PRC decisions. 2, extend the current 120-day limit on the imposition of discipline up to 1 year, consistent with existing California law. And 3, give the PRC full discretion and access to evidence to review complaints as to alleged officer misconduct. As part of the review of proposed improvements to the PRC process, the PRC should analyze police review policies and structures in other jurisdictions, for example, San Francisco, BART, etc. All PRC models and engage relevant stakeholders, including the Berkeley Police Association and community organizations developing proposals. Full analysis by the PRC and city manager must be reported to City Council by May 2018. So I guess my question is, so this happened on November 14th, 2017. I know that some time ago I could find out the date at a PRC meeting. Well, I should say until last week, no subcommittee was formed to address this work that was tasked by council. I do know that Commissioner Lippman had an exchange during a PRC meeting, in which he was talking with Commissioner Roberts and mentioned that the community was going to come up with something, and that the commission should just wait a month and then they would see that. And that was a month or 2 ago. And from my observation point, the PRC didn't do anything. My question is, given the referral from council, do you see the task of the subcommittee as addressing this referral?
I think it's both, because the task of subcommittee is threefold, like I said at the beginning. The motion that created the subcommittee is based on all the 3 branches. Review the current proposal because it's in front of us and it's immediate, and if we don't have an opinion on it, we might find ourselves that by our silence might be admission that it is something that we are in support of, which I'm not saying that that's the intended result of not dealing with this issue before, or the postponing dealing with it, even though we had it directed by City Council. But the end result now is that we are in a situation in which, if we don't have an opinion about this, our silence might be approval. At the same time, the directive by City Council has to take consideration, because we have done those before, And we submitted some of those changes to city council and to the city manager, but what never happened is we never got the legal evaluation back from the district attorney, city attorney, and we never got, and because of the meet and confer process, some of the items that we have submitted as possible changes are still caught up in that discussion. So it seems to me that the PRC, as it relates to this city council directive and to this proposal, I think we have walked ourselves into a corner by direct result or not direct result. Now we're in a corner going, the changes that we submitted before are in the meet and confer. We don't have a legal opinion. We haven't had a conversation. How can we incorporate those into the original ordinance so that we can push forward with those? And now we have an ordinance in front of us that is creating a huge change to the PRC, which is going in front of City Council for a possible vote to go as a ballot measure. So now we're confronted with everything.
I mean, so my, I guess
Your answer to him is yes, that
So that
it does include the original referral. In addition, the commission was tasked by the full commission last week to consider the ballot measure submitted by that group.
there was a vote on that, considering the,
Yes. That was the creation.
After you left the meeting, we brought it up.
Yeah,
Sorry, what?
After you left the meeting, we came up later on in the evening, the PRC did take the vote, as Byron explained.
Okay, so
After last meeting.
after I left the PRC meeting last week,
What happened?
you went into closed session though, that's why I left.
Maybe you-
No, you
were.
The meeting was taken outside of closed session, but the intent.
No, I'm sorry, I take it back, you were here, I thought you left the meeting.
No,
I'm just trying to understand, when did the PRC say we will consider this, this proposal?
when that item was on the agenda for discussion on the agenda, 8A or 9A.
Okay, and there was a vote then to accept this
To incorporate into the subcommittee for review and evaluation.
I see.
Oh, so you were there when they took the vote? Or did you remember?
Don't recall, I mean,
That's okay.
Oh, we,
Just
yeah,
trying
we
to track-
did, we did do to fold it into
and
what.
so is there a requirement that this be the model that you edit, or that
No.
you change to?
No.
No, but one of the directives is to, as I said, is to either evaluate the proposal with pros and cons. What do we like as the recommendations and what don't we like as the recommendations? Use this as a template and create a new one based on this. If we think that something here is of value, what do we take out, what do we put in, what is not necessary? Or the third one is to use also in conjunction, but what I am concerned about is that the more that they put us on that, the more that they put it, as I was thinking about it after, the more that they put on that motion for the creation subcommittee is to create more work and more work and more work that'll take longer. I think our first order of business is to go to city council on the next meeting and say to them, we need time to work on this. It's being postponed for whatever reasons, we're here, give us the time to do this.
Well, they gave us till May.
Because if
You
we
wanna take
get
those
the full ordinance review right now, without getting to say to city council the proposal, this is why we disagree with this ballot measure, we are going to we can do two things.
And then, well, the process outlined where council refers to the PRC, includes feedback loops with legal and includes several sort of feedback discussion loops with other folks.
And to be clear, the PRC could have created a subcommittee to deal with that, or the PRC could have created a subcommittee to create an ordinance. Right?
Or
They
both.
could have done both.
Right.
They didn't do one.
No, the chair didn't do anything, didn't even bring it to our attention.
So we know what hasn't been done, and
Yeah.
we have a lot to do. So
That's right.
I
I think it's
encourage you
doable.
all to move forward.
Yeah, I think it's doable, we could take this, section by section, I think it's doable.
So that's right. So right now, I think it could work in tandem. We can look at this proposal, talk about the things that we like, we don't like,
Right.
what should be out, and the things that we like can either be incorporated onto a new proposal, or could also be incorporated into changes to the current ordinance.
Okay. So
Right?
how do you want to move forward now?
So, now that we have got all out of the way, all that out of the
No,
way.
that was important, that was very important.
Now that we've gotten that all out of the way, have the commissioners had the chance to look through the proposal?
Before you do that, can I just say,
Please.
this word? And, I don't know if you would find it useful to have a larger discussion, just setting aside for a second the proposals submitted by the community group. Setting aside our own enabling ordinance. Perhaps subcommittee members would want to consider a short discussion about what level of community oversight does Berkeley need for its police department? A lot of issues are often, national issues are conflated with us in the city, and people, unfortunately, mix up a lot of issues that don't necessarily apply here. And also, what's not sufficiently working with the current model? I would urge you to have a brief discussion about that before we look at taking something and just moving through it. What is it that we want, ultimately? What's not working?
Well, I think we need a commission that expresses the most progressive policing practices, like they do in California, in San Francisco, and Oakland, and Bart. But I understand your concern whether it matches Berkeley, but my concern also is that if you wait to put something in place or to have something delineated, which is a progressive policy in place, to wait until something is a casualty for it so you can implement it, you're behind.
Are they progressive policies, or are they policies in reaction to specific challenges that those jurisdictions had? As you well know, BART was created because of the death of Officer Grant. Have we had that situation in Berkeley?
But that doesn't mean that having an independent auditor, the police review commissioner, the police review secretary, being able to look into internal affairs investigations to make sure that they're conducted in a manner that is proper, that doesn't invalidate that. An African American or a brown person or a white person or a woman or a transgender person doesn't have to die in custody in Berkeley in a way that is improper use of force in order for us to implement those kind of steps. So it's a give and take.
Yeah. So
it's a give and take.
So what do we need here?
But I understand, but if we start discussing what we need here, before we discuss what we have here, then what we'll have then is nothing.
Okay, we don't think it works.
No, I know. I think that what we can do is this proposes that the chief of police be terminated by the commission. That's not in our ordinance. That's the proposal here. Is that what the Berkeley Police Review Commission and the city of Berkeley needs? Do we need a commission that has the power to terminate the chief of police? And that is part of the conversation. I don't think we need that. And that's out of the way.
Can the San Francisco Police Commission fire the chief, or does that have to be done by the board?
It's done in conjunction with the mayor, I believe.
That's right.
Yeah.
So
They make a recommendation to the city council.
like we would to ours. They make it to the board of
The
supervisors.
police commission is the top of the food chain, the police department. They actually run the police department. They either have direct termination authority or they make a pro forma recommendation to the mayor. I'm not remembering the specifics, but they are involved.
They make, yeah, go ahead.
I don't know.
They listen to cases, internal affairs, the Office of Officer Accountability, of police misconduct accountability, makes a presentation to the commissioners. The commissioners then look at the facts on the case, allegations against the police officer, and they make a determination of what they think should be the discipline. The chief of police will also speak at those commissions based on what he or she thinks is the proper procedure to follow. And then they make a recommendation to the mayor for that. But they have to adjudicate the allegations, and they have to make a finding on discipline. And that goes then to the mayor to make a determination. Because the mayor ultimately it's not a charter. The mayor runs the city, it's not a city manager. So the city manager doesn't exist. The deputy city directors in San Francisco, the mayor makes a decision, right? So, and that will make sense to me. That will make sense to me. So, I think we can do all of it at the same time. I mean, but we need to break it down.
Okay, all right.
Okay.
Because we know that there's items here that we agree on. 120 days, well, we think it should be a year. I mean, we know that the commissioner has recommended that it should be preponderance of the evidence. We know that, the commissioner has voted on that. I mean, over and over again, 2 chairs passed, 3 chairs passed. So, I mean, we know that there's some items here that we agree on that are part of this. What we need to figure out is, first and foremost, do we believe that there should be a police commission, the creation of a police commission?
Good start.
Right? That's the first question. Do we believe that there should be the creation, that the PRC should be dissolved, and instead a police commission should be created?
Okay, you're getting some eggs here. A police commission structured how?
Well, that's would be a follow-up question, so he's just asking about, you're asking about the name?
That's right. Do we believe that the PRC as it stands right now should be dissolved, and a police commission with more power should be created instead? Because that's here. That's here, right? And that's what this intends to do. Do we believe that that's the right step to take?
Well, structurally, Oversight, how would I calling it a police commission, irrespective of the modalities in here, how would that differ from the police review commission?
I think they're caught up in the name.
That's
As in San Francisco, you're a police commissioner. I mean, right? I mean, in the city of New York, as an example.
So I guess what I'm saying, this thing talks about a whole different structure in establishing a police commission.
Sure.
I am, like my fellow commissioner here, opposed to it. I think we ought to keep the selection process the way it is. So how would that be any different whether we call ourselves the police commission or the police review commission?
Because I think, so if you have a restaurant, like doing a pure example, you have a restaurant that is called plantains and black beans and rice, right? And you want to, and that restaurant fails. You don't want to call it plantain and black beans and rice because you think it's a failure. You want to call it something else and red beans and rice, because they believe that by changing the dynamic of the name and the title, you take away all the history of the PRC and create something new. By creating something new, there isn't anymore the argument of going, but at the PRC we used to do this. The PRC no longer exists because the PRC had these limitations. By creating a police commission, we're adding a new entity to do police oversight with this powers. That's their mentality. I'm not advocating for either way. I'm just saying that's their mentality.
That's extremely interesting. That goes me, like,
So
I mean, I don't know how I react that either way, because I would like to say, I think the PRC has been I've worked with a lot of incredible people on it. We've done some incredible things, and worked with some incredible officers up to chiefs. And, I don't know if we should throw that all out just because we're going to say we're going to call ourselves the police commission, and from now on, whatever happened to the PRC since 1973 no longer matters or exists.
well, it's a review part too, right? It's the police review what they want to do in the office of what is it called?
Police accountability.
Police accountability that used to be before. What used to be called?
Office of Citizen Complaints.
Office of the Citizens Complaint. So you went from Officer of Citizens Complaint to Office of Police Accountability. It's a name change, the statute changed, the powers changed, but you went from Citizens Complaint to Police Accountability. That creates a much bigger umbrella on how it is looked, how it is seen, how the powers fit within that structure. So in the review aspect to some of these folks, I'm assuming is it's too small. So we cannot be caught up in whether a name change is specific, but the question is, do we believe that their abdication of what exists right now into creating something else has some validity? Do we believe that there's room for a police commission instead of a police review commission in the city of Berkeley, regardless of the powers that he has?
That maybe you'll be able to answer that as you go through as you start talking about the functionality and the authority that's proposed in this measure.
Yeah.
And maybe we can start with the first section. After definitions, creation and role.
Yeah, for the record, I believe the definitions are in the wrong place. I think the definitions right off the bat on the proposal are in the wrong place.
They are.
Whatever, I believe that the definitions, what misconduct, affirmative act violates, willful failure to act. What about what about an act of omission, or, it's just, what about indirect act, right? So it's not even fit there, you know?
Yeah, I would recommend that we just put the definitions aside for
Yeah.
now and move on to creation and role, if that's okay.
So we're not
Talking
clear.
broad, talking broad, somewhat specific terms about that section, and then move on to the next section. Just make some large points, and we'll come back and flush it out.
So the creation and role. What are your folks' thoughts on this?
And I would ask you all to compare that to what's in the enabling ordinance.
That's right. The original 73?
Yes. Section 1 of the
And I forgot to address something for you, Michael. You were talking about Robert's concerns about legality.
Yeah.
You can take for granted that even if this passes, it will go into a legal challenge.
Oh, I didn't know that. Oh, I didn't know.
And whatever happens after that legal challenge, it's up to the seers to know.
Mhm.
But you can bet your patootie that it's gonna go into a legal
Oh,
challenge
no,
right at the back.
I think
So,
I understood.
it's-
What section?
In the original
Enabling
ordinance,
ordinance.
section 1.
Section 1, yeah, perfect.
Where it says there is hereby established the Berkeley Police Commission.
Well, that is,
Are you talking about functions and duties?
Yeah, we're looking at creation.
we're under
role.
creation role, but I have
Creation
suggested,
role.
as you
Oh, yeah.
consider that section, refer back to the original language regarding our purpose in the enabling ordinance, which is section 1 of the original 1972 ordinance.
So you would have to look at, you got 3 things to work from.
I
I
think-
see you going back to the original ordinance,
Just
no, the ballot initiative, and George's.
No.
George-
Just, yeah. You can use mine as a referral if you want to, but we'll be done. Let's just, yeah.
Just-
Ordinance
We're
is
taking 1 and 2
proposal.
right now.
So, yes, and section B of the community's proposal, creation and role.
Mhm.
Don't write it, Michael, look at it. Don't make me come over there. We only got.
I will beat you with my water, you know. Section B, creation and role.
Yes.
Where's that?
Which we have Bill here.
Who?
William. White.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I thought that's what you were doing. Yeah, it would be helpful.
So I was suggesting that you write it now. Just what are the broad themes that we want to accomplish? Maybe we can marry these two or not. Because this one is focused on community participation and it gives 2 broad functions. The original ordinance, reviewing policy and investigating complaints. This one here provides oversight authority of the department by, let's see, how do they do that? And then they start to lay out how that happens.
It's under 83. Actually, let me look at the original one, because I deleted a bunch of stuff.
83.
What are you looking for?
On creation of role, vis-a-vis section 1, 2, 3, and section 1 and 2 of the ordinance, of the neighborhood ordinance,
Section 1.
which is not broad enough. So I think they parcel out under commission functions. this ordinance is all over the place. You know, record keeping and confidentiality as for functions and duties, and the functions and duties only talks, the first paragraph talks about the transference of the PRC to the commission. It's like,
It seems like the closest they come to what the original ordinance is in B1. And setting an overall, purpose, but it seems lacking in itself, or just overly broad. So this is where you start to answer, what is it that you will want this new entity to do? You want to include aspects of community, providing for community participation in setting and reviewing police department policies? You want to marry that to, what they have here in the proposal?
so it's only from 89, from 90 until 107, it's closer to section 1 of the enabling ordinance. And there is, and there's a little blurb down, but the blurb, all the other responsibilities are transferred from the commission to the, of the policy director.
What page you on now?
On page 3.
Yeah,
2 or 3.
The commission functions starting on 88 that should be.
Oh, I see.
That should come after, B1, right there.
Do you have this in Word? The enabling ordinance?
I don't, I think I can put it in Word.
You probably have a much on that computer than my old iMac.
Well, I put this one in Word, I should really put that one in Word.
My only concern is that it's not an apples to oranges. I mean, the enabling ordinance is very well written as it relates to structurally. It's very well written structurally. This is not.
Which, the original ordinance?
Yes. Yeah. This ordinance that we have in front of us is, if we're gonna play match to match by point, we'll be here for 3 hours.
Yeah.
So I mean, that's my only
So I
concern.
wasn't suggesting you're right, I was just wondering, you need to come to some agreement of what, you were talking about this entity, about changing the name, but what do you ultimately want this entity to do? That was my question.
Yeah.
I wasn't asking you to write this now.
No, I mean, so the question, and that's what I said, you know, maybe looking at items that are all of those 19 pages for the ordinance, taking out what we don't agree with that, well, that could be something that should be on the ordinance, or is that much different? It might work faster, because we can say in items that are in the ordinance that there are in disagreement that are changing, is that an item that we want to put on the ordinance as a change, right? So the first thing was the name itself, whether the PRC can continue to function with bigger powers, or whether the creation of the police commission is necessary, right? And I think we're saying we understand what the naming issue is, but that it might necessarily be relevant as it relates to increasing the powers of the PRC right now, if that's the recommendation, because regardless of the name is the name. It's not the name that matters, it's the function by which it operates, right?
Sure.
So, are you hanging there, Chief? So we in agreement that we agree that number one, the general purpose of this ordinance is to provide for community participation in setting and reviewing police department policies, practices, and procedures, and to provide the need for prompt, impartial, and fair investigation of complaints brought by individuals like the Berkeley Police Department. That's perfect, because it doesn't, that section 1, that doesn't preclude from anything from being added to that. You can add a process of an investigation, you can flesh out how the review of the police department policies and practices takes place. But that as an enabling, over-encompassing mission, it's functional. I mean, it functions well. I mean, it's how you flesh it out that might be the disagreement.
It might require some change if you start talking about, the word reviewing here is huge.
Yeah.
If you start talking about giving the police, the commission direct authority over the department and hiring and firing employees, you might have to make some changes to that. I'm not suggesting you do that, I'm just,
It's whether it's reviewing and implementing, right? It's whether we are reviewing or reviewing and implementing. Because right now we can make a proposal for a general order as a change, but then it's a collaborative effort in which the police department can choose to or not to implement.
Yeah.
I mean, in the years that I've been here, that's maybe 1 out of 10 instances in which the department has not accepted our recommendations in the review process. So
this gives you authority to review policies from over here.
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
This says in B1, it establishes a commission to oversee. So again, my question is, do you want this new entity, will you want this new entity to oversee the department? Or to do its work from externally to the department as it does now?
do we think
Well,
that?
how would you define oversee for me?
Well, I think
What
of
you
it-
mean it to be.
I think of the San Francisco model. The San Francisco Commission is over that department, and they technically or formally, they hire and fire the police. All policies have to go through them. They have huge authority over that department. They are part of the department. We are not.
Okay, if I can just interject, are they paid employees of the city?
They're
Is
not
that,
paid
no, is
employees.
that their job?
They get stipends, but it's not.
Oh, so it's just,
I wouldn't say that, they're not saying that Berkeley Police Department employees individually, but the commission itself,
The police in San Francisco?
yes,
Yes.
it's, boy, I mean, it's the highest authority.
Yeah, but I'm questioning, even though we make it stipends, is that a job that they do?
In addition to,
In addition to,
it's not a $150,000 job,
They're appointees.
because I
oh,
don't
they're
think,
just like, they're
you know,
appointed.
but there's a higher stipend.
okay.
Like they're proposing
The
here,
point I'm trying to make is,
$12,000 a year.
this is what they do in life. That's not what
No,
we
that's not
do,
what they do in life.
but they're pretty expertise.
But for example, Petra de Jesus, which is always.
So they have their own offices?
No. For example, Petra de Jesus, well, there's an office, right, Paul? But she's a big social justice person, right? For the mission. I mean, whether you agree with her policies or not. I mean, she is a member of the commission appointed appointed, and that's not what she does. She's a civil rights lawyer, right? Her job is a civil rights lawyer, but she's also a commissioner in San Francisco, right? So this is not their full-time jobs.
Because I guess I'm talking about it. My impression, and obviously we see them on TV all the time, going back decades, and a whole variety of issues, is that it appeared to me that these are people, appointees, who put in a lot of time.
They do.
And do a lot of work, and are very, very knowledgeable of what police practices are and training involves, and I'm not sure any of the people that we're talking about here, and we talk about no matter how we want, including ourselves, anywhere near that level of having a police commissioner, similar to thinking about San Francisco when.
Well, San Francisco has different issues than Berkeley, and personally, I don't
It's a
see,
huge, bigger city too.
it's a huge city, so their issues are totally different from a small town like Berkeley. So, reading this proposal and what they're requesting and wanting to implement, I just don't see it fitting, in my opinion, it's just my opinion, in this city, because we don't have the same dynamics that they're having in San Francisco.
No,
That's just
that's point
What I'm
I
saying,
was making.
so I look at this as a document that we could probably go section by section and wrap this up and have it apply to the structure that we have in this city and what our needs are here in Berkeley. Because our needs are totally different from some Oakland's needs or New York's needs or whatever. So, I mean, that's how I'm looking at it.
No, I agree, but let's not forget also that some of the practices might be beneficial to have as well.
Yeah, that's true, I agree with that.
So the question is, and the question that he's asking, do we want to have just a power to review general orders and directives and operational, or do we want also to have a final say, right? Or would it work to say that work in conjunction with the police department in reviewing and implementing, whether that creates a buffer as well? Not the buffer of final say, but in conjunction with, right? It's more explicit than just reviewing. But the reviewing and implementing with the police department, policies and procedures, blah, blah, blah. Whether that review and implement with the police department covers a spread instead of just going, I implement, you follow.
Right, yeah.
I review, you decide whether to follow it or not. Which is the dynamic on the other side, right?
Yeah.
Do I say to you, I think we should do this, and I go, I'll think about it? Or do I say, you need to do this whether you like it or not? And that's a much different dynamic that, and I know you hate this, and the chief doesn't like when I use this word, fails to have the department buy into what the process is. Or whether by saying reviewing and implementing with the police department, whether that creates a shared responsibility. So there's wording changes that could happen here as well.
Yeah.
Here they're saying we'll implement, you'll accept. We now say we only review. So do we think that, yeah, implementation, having a wording to the implementation with the police department, it's an easy in-between agreement by changing by adding a word and a phrase. What do you think, Michael?
Review and implement?
Review and implementing with the police department. So you see what it says here.
Tell me what page you're on.
I'm on section 1. They're saying they want to implement, right?
You're section 1 of the new ordinance, or section 1 of ours. Which section 1 of 4644?
Yeah, so
Okay, go ahead.
on the left,
Yeah.
for the ordinance, which shall oversee the police department in order to ensure that its policies, practices, and customs conform to constitutional policing. The problem with constitutional policing, I have a problem with that too. The Supreme Court can decide what's constitutional or not tomorrow. And that could be that if you are 13 years old and don't have one eye, you're out. I'm being silly about this, but constitutional policing is decided by the Constitution and the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court can decide whether it's constitutional or not. So I'm not sure the use of constitutional policing there is necessarily the smarter thing to use. Right? Because we know that some of the tenets of the civil rights law were thrown out of the Supreme Court. Right? So we need to be careful when we define constitutional policing.
So George asked one question.
No, please keep us honest.
I think there are 2 or 3 major questions you have to decide, and we'll help you move through this, and that is, do you want a new entity to review policy as we currently do and make recommendations, or do you want to set policy? Do you want to make recommendations to staff, or do you want to oversee the staff that handles the investigations? And do you want hiring and firing authority over the chief to be involved in that process and other employees, including employees of the disciplinary
Take it to staff. Take it to staff.
Yeah, so Let's start with policy. You want all policies to go through this new entity and be approved before they can take effect?
When you say policy, exactly what you mean.
The GOs that you often review.
Okay, see, that's a problem for me.
But let's focus on one of them.
Yeah, let's start there.
What, policies,
That's-
general orders?
Not-
Policy.
Yeah, you're the function of this new entity. You want to continue reviewing them, making recommendations to the chief and the department, or do you want to set policy?
Okay. Truth be told, I've been on here for 14 years, and I don't think I am qualified to set policy for an institution with a person at the top who goes through months and months and months of training, even to put on a uniform and go through all that. None of us are qualified to look at each, go through each little incident that they're confronted with at the training academy and decide, I think that's way beyond my pay grade. I like to think I've been somewhat successful in doing the best I can in subcommittees to understand and be told, well, here's how, when somebody's hands go behind, they go like this in the floor, when they tell a person to get out of the car, their hands up, why the reaction took place, which I did not know before, for example. Because I haven't gone through the police training academy. So I don't think we're really qualified to do that. Work with, yes. Listen to, have policies to explain, whether it's like domestic violence, crowd control, surveillance, what have you. But I don't think we're qualified to assume the role of doing it ourselves.
So there's a difference between operational.
Yeah.
I'm gonna tell the chief he needs to put 5 people in that corner every Saturday from 3 to 5. I'm not qualified.
Yeah.
But I'm qualified to say to him, you will use the escalation techniques when approaching a critical incident. I have the power to do that because I have the power to evaluate how would I like to be treated on an incident that way. So remember, don't confuse both.
I was talking about policy.
But
Again, I
that's a
think it's
procedure. That's a procedure. Policies are. It is the policy of the police department to go away from a reasonable use of force to a minimal use of force policy engagement. Do I have the ability, because I'm a police officer, to say that minimal use of force is different than reasonable use of force? No, but I know that minimal use of force has been used and it's trying to be a movement in the United States, and there are 2 or 3 police departments that are using minimal use of force. And do I believe that a minimal use of force engagement in the community is a valid request for citizens of Berkeley to have with their police department? I should have input on that. The problem is whether I'm going to say to him, without his input, you will implement a minimal use of force.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
But not the same thing as saying we can help implement policy, which is to the best understanding of the citizens of Berkeley, in conjunction with the police department. It's a much different dynamic. I don't want us to confuse either, because you living in the city, paying taxes, being involved in listening to your neighbors and seeing what happens to your neighbors and to communities or whatever communities they are, you should be able to say, this is the kind of police department I want him to act this way. You don't have to have law enforcement training to understand how the police department needs to interact with the community. Now, having said to them, you're gonna use minimal use of force, and in Code 3 responses, you will not ask for backup, because that's a wrong utilization of your resources, and they could be someplace else. That is non-functional. It is not operationally within your jurisdiction or ability to understand. But there's some things that you can do, right? A Code 3 is the highest Code 3. When there's armed, there are people calling for people. Code 3 responses, much different, right? I'm getting in the weeds here, but I should be able to say, maybe for Code 3 responses, you should always ask for backup, right? We had the Anita Gay shooting, right? The person should have a call for backup before interacting with Anita Gay. We decided that the police officer acted in the way that he could act because there was a present danger to the police officer, and to Anita Gay's, I forget it was niece or whatever it was, daughter. Right? So we knew that the police officer would say the police officer acted the right way because it was a present in public danger. He acted in the public safety, right? So we know that. We cannot say, well, you'll never do that, right? So there are some aspects of operations that we might not have the ability to make a statement because we don't know what it is. But there are some aspects that we can and should. And if we are not educated, we can have a presentation by someone who does. We can have a discussion. We can interact with the community. The police department can bring their own expert to say, we're not going to do it that way because of this. And we can make a decision or recommendation.
That's what we do now.
I know, but we wait and hope that the implementation happens because of political pressure. It is, we don't have a bigger say on saying this is the way that it should be implemented. Causing point, this whole discussion about the body-worn cameras, right? A police commission would have said, we want body-worn cameras, city council, you will implement this is what the police department needs. Instead of just going through all the things possible, maybe not in result or in result of a lawsuit, to create this blah, 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 instead of a pilot program started by Chief Meehan, all this stuff. Do you go away from all of this for practical policies and implementation that might be needed, but there are times in which implementing policies, we might not have a know-how. But do we have a bigger say at times than just reviewing and making a recommendation? So that's why it's important not to dismiss this completely. I'm not voting either way.
And you made the point that sometimes we just do not have the know-how in some of these things. So, that concerns me. And one of the concerns is that this proposal, sort of like almost by a word and a vote, grants people like myself
absolute power
on stuff that I really don't know.
Without any.
In fairness to the proposal, which, I won't say that. I won't say what I was going to say, but I will say that it seems to complement. It seems to recognize that you will all have more training.
Yeah. That we need more
it's
training.
Recognizing that in order to give you this, you will be required to have far more training.
Well, I got that, which is why I went into exactly how does the SF Police Commission work. If I was going to be on this police commission, would I give up part of my day job and figure out we get some money from this because it's going to involve a lot of work, and I may have my own office, I don't know what. Whatever it is, it sounds like exactly
I
what
believe
you
it gets
said.
about $500 a month.
No, it's not even a pay, it's a time.
It's not a salary.
Yeah.
But it's a lot of time, because
That's-
I've known people who served on it. It's a lot of time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a lot of time. Their proposal of money could be $10,000 a year, the way that it pans out. But the reality is, that you can get the training. Mm-hmm. The problem is that the city of Berkeley doesn't work on those things. I am obligated to go through training at BART. Every month I have to have an expert in front of me for an hour and talk about training, internal affairs, investigations, discipline, procedural justice. New legal regulations, police. I have to go into a use of force module with police officers and interact in a use of force module so that I know what it is that they go through. So at BART, I'm obligated to go through this training every month because it's a public agency, and a public agency requires that training. This is a city commission. So, I think that one of the concerns that the police department has is that we are not trained enough, we're not selected correctly enough, to their understanding. Let me put it to their understanding. We're not selected correctly enough, we don't have the training enough, because we don't have any of that, we shouldn't be in a position to make decisions that affect them on their operations, their safety, the safety of the community, and their own labor concerns as it relates to their employment. To me, that's how I see their disagreement.
That's how they see the PRC.
Well, the PRC doesn't have the powers as it's offering.
You described it like, I bet you, I don't know what tense you were using. If you were describing the PRC, I think some of those criticisms are fair enough.
That's right.
But if you're creating a whole new body, then there better be the means, the finances, the time to do something similar to, I assume that's what they do in either Bard or San Francisco. I know you're not getting paid, but that's not your full job. So that would change under this. But
Yeah, what this didn't change is the political aspect. I mean, so.
Well, can I try something?
Mhm.
How would you assess the department over the years, responsiveness in accepting your recommendations? Again, I go back to what's not working.
I don't think.
Since I've been sitting here, and I've been here 8+ years, you've been here a little longer, you've been here a little longer, I would just, off the top of my head, it seems like the department accepts about 80–90% of your recommendations.
Yeah.
If not more. So again, what's not working?
I would
And
mention,
we should probably let the chief chime in.
I would mention, in conjunction with what he said, when we spent tons and tons of time doing it, looking into what happened on Telegraph Avenue December 4th, what did they do? They came up with a huge amount of research work and recommendations. What were there, 40 recommendations going back to that December 4th?
2014?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a giant amount of staff work.
And then
employees
you
were
came up with
full-time.
us, and I forget how it broke down, but I think say there were 34 recommendations, and we were on the same page of them with about 30, I think.
I know, but see, and now you weren't here, Commissioner Allamby, so just a little bit, and because I don't know if you know this, but I'm really close friends with Ben and his wife. I mean, so it's a different dynamic, right? It's a different dynamic. When I first joined this commission, this communication didn't happen. Chief Hamilton had given up because the commission was not standing up to a commissioner who was now on the board, screaming on the top of that commissioner's lungs at the chief on the room. So that created a much different dynamic that was very negative. It took Sherry Smith and William White and Sharon Kidd and myself and Russell Bloom and Shinoy to create and even to an extent, even positive and negative, Alison Bernstein, to create a dynamic with Chief Meehan and Chief Greenwood and Chief Hamilton to change the dynamic of a cooperation. The problem is that when we have a dynamic of a change in city council, and that's why I took you out of that spectrum, right? Because Ben is not that way. We have changed the dynamic. We have changed the dynamic, so it is fair to say that in the dynamic in which a political atmosphere changes, one way or the other is the reaction and cooperation of the department going to be as positive and as willing because the dynamic doesn't change. So sometimes it is important to set boundaries and set definitions and yes, powers that are set in stone so the department knows that how they have to cooperate with us and how we have to cooperate with them is not conducive to a political whim or a personal biases.
Yes, yes.
And so that's part of the argument here, how I see it in some escalation of responsibilities for the police, for the PRC. Because it's not how we interact with each other, but how we have to interact with each other, irrespectively of our political or own personal agendas. Which the dynamic that has changed now is because this dais, and I said, I'm going to take the two out of you that completely out of that equation, has changed the dynamic by which we operated with each other to not being a cohesive, collaborative effort, but being more into, I know you're doing something wrong, so I'm going to stop you, and that's the argument. And this is what this is. I two-way. So, but there's something to be said about having a bigger piece of the pie on implementing policies, just away from just reviewing and recommending.
You have a recommendation?
Let me finish. There's something to be said about having the ability to, and I know it's a big bone to pick with the union and the police department, to have a recommendation on discipline. A recommendation on discipline is much different than setting dead stone that individual will be fired, right? But we don't have access to internal affairs investigations. We don't have access to a police officer's record to see whether not only is the allegation that in front of us is the allegation we're dealing with, or whether that police officer had a history of blanco, 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 blank. So we're not able to make information on discipline because we don't have that history. So this discussion is important to have.
That's going to be a huge discussion. That's why I was trying to get you to just focus on policy.
So reviewing with policies and procedures, the review and implementing in conjunction with the police department, it's something that is not written here. It does a setting, so I don't know why setting and reviewing policy. Setting to me means that you set policy, so I don't understand why this language is not used completely. And that is because our argument again, of every time that we have a question about our dynamic, city attorney might go, that's beyond your purview. Even though it's beyond your purview. Even though it says setting and reviewing of policies and procedures. So I think that their conflict here is that they're trying to go to the other side completely to create and to eliminate any nuance or gray areas. And in doing that, they're creating a monster. Sure. Jump in, Jefe. As chief, or in Spanish, sir.
I recommend it. Just a couple notes on policy. I find that in these discussions, there's so much sort of implied problematic stuff because of the way the discussion exists. And I always sort of feel like circling back, it's kind of to the what are we solving type of thing. For example, a lot of the discussion implies that somehow the PRC has little or low or less influence on the police department and the running of the police department. For example, the policy review, I'd say my experience is completely different than that. Prior to becoming chief and as chief, like I am here sincerely to hear the concerns about policy, consider them with my staff, consider them with the input of Lexipol, which is the company where we're converting all of our policies, the city attorney. I'm interested in the labor side and the labor attorney side, which has a tremendous amount of experience actually litigating these things, not just civil litigation, but defense litigation of police officers who are being sued for misconduct. So, number one, the PRC does have influence. Number two, you'd asked about when we don't take the feedback, and you said 90% or 80 or 90%. And my experience is that lots of feedback is incorporated in the policies. Sometimes things go slowly for a number of reasons, but I think ultimately, for example, the body-worn camera policy is going to have most of, if not all of, the final points that the PRC was interested in, most of those are going to be in the policy, I believe, just as an example. So I think it's wrong to just operate from the sense of the PRC doesn't have influence on policy. The current review aspect of the PRC with regards to policy is, to me, alive and well and strong, and it's here. With regards to, I mentioned Lexipol, so I think there have been presentations to the commission. It's challenging when there's turnover of commissioners, here and there, and coming and going, which is that, for example, the right to watch policy was one of the first things I sat in as chief of the PRC. There was a meeting, I think it was like in November, and we heard it out and made an agreement, and here's what it was, and we set that policy. And then because of the change in commissioners, the whole thing was brought up again, and now it's sort of back in my court to respond to.
Yeah.
And so it is bad public policy even to get in the territory where, because of changes, for example, of commission personnel, the police department is subject to having its hundreds of policies potentially pulled and reviewed because of a new and different concern. There has to be, in our institution, a sense of stability and not of disruption. I sort of feel like that's how our institution will make it through tough times, is just that, right? And another aspect of policy just to think about is on the current agenda, I believe, or on the full commission's agenda, I think, is what to do with the Lexipol review. So I've got, I think, well over 100 policies that we're ready to switch over, and that I had committed as chief to bring those by a couple dozen at a time to the PRC, so you have a chance to review the policies and go, oh, we're good with this, or wait, I got a problem with this, so we can, but I need to switch the whole department over. And it's gonna be at the point where the commission, the full commission will have dozens, if not more than 100 policies, where I'm gonna need to switch those over. And so, to me, it's a concern that hasn't been prioritized, but it also calls out what I'm saying, which is that the commission, as it can operate, can give and does give feedback to policies. Now, as for whether or not the chief of police, me, previous ones, the future ones, have to do exactly what the commission says, fair point of discussion about is that good public policy? I mean, that's a fair point of discussion. But I don't want to minimize the fact that the commission can, through the regular processes of the city council, put things on council's agenda so the council can make a decision, at least at a high level policy thing, and we've seen that over and over again. So the idea that the PRC somehow is completely ignored, which is kind of inferred in some of this discussion, is not true, right?
Helpless was the word I think.
Okay, I mean that, like, we've seen, I've heard a commissioner say, oh, if the chief doesn't want to do it, we'll just take it to council and they'll make the city manager do it. That was coming out of the commissioner's lips, like, okay, whether that's fully true or not, the basic idea is there, which is that council has the authority to set policy, at least at a high level. And the idea not being to get into the operational points and outside the charter as far as that goes. So it's just important to me to really say out that the PRC does have influence. The PRC's voice is heard in concerns in evaluating policies. And to that end, I actually need the PRC to start looking at these Lexipol policies, because that's a project that's been going on for years. Mm-hmm. And in my first year as chief, we really sort of tried to really give the resources internally to review those policies, because that's an extensive process in itself. That's not one person writing policy. That's a working group that's gone through all these policies and said, we're good with it all the way up to my level, and I read them and go, I think I'm good with it. So.
But I was part of the subcommittee, chief, and in all fairness, you're bringing back some of those policies that we already had decided on and voted on for implementation, and one that sat for a very long time without any movement was the use of force policy, which was part of the subcommittee Lexipol, and moved to the full commission on a recommendation to the police department, and it has sat there for 2 years.
But that's ended up.
I understand, but
I'm not part of that.
I'm trying to explain to you what is it that they're coming from. So how they evaluate one instance becomes yeah, that's right. One instance, well, they're members of the commission. One instance of maybe a little slower of the process, to them it becomes the way that the department operates all the time. So they're using 1 or 2 instances to create a narrative. And the narrative for them is more comfortable than understanding how things flow. So I'm with you, but there's been some instances. I mean, even the one, the right to watch policy, as a perfect example, we had agreed on the language. The language was specific. We were there, and then by a mistake of one way or the other, some wording was changed by then Captain Harris without us knowing, and he came back to us that the change had been made, and it created all this movement that we're here. So they based that. That's right.
And I came to the commission.
But they don't remember that. I understand.
But I'm saying, you're telling that story, and I'm saying, and I sat down and we worked it through with the PRC, and I issued the policy 48 hours later. And then I'm asked to pull the, review and change the thing again. It's that kind of process that would make it impossible for us to run the police department. Ultimately, we have so many policies that need looking at, and I just...
and that's why their bias is expressed. They're biased in thinking that even when change happens, that the ulterior motive is a -1 or 1 of subterfuge. What creates is always a belief that the department is never going to do the right thing and it has to be obligated. That's their mentality. I completely disagree with that, but that's where this comes in. So
we're at 7:30. Do you all want to continue?
So yeah, we're
7:30.
Well, we half hour more ending out,
Okay.
or you have a half hour more ending out.
We can stay a half an hour. I'm just cold.
Yeah. So I mean, so we know. I mean, we know that that we have to. I mean, I think that what it's just because we need to see next steps forward, next meeting, so right now. I think that we're in agreement that we believe that this is too draconian. I think we're in agreement with that. We're also in agreement that we are going to, one way or the other, let city council know that we think the process needs to play out for May. And because we disagree with how rushed this is and how the process that is taking place. We also agree that it is a policy issue, that there's some policies, there's discipline, and there's process that we need to discuss, looking at our current ordinance, looking at the proposal that the folks are making, and then evaluating, yes, what here could work for Berkeley, what is not necessarily will work for Berkeley because it is not what the police department needs or the community needs. And I think that our assignment will be to look at this again, and come back with concrete block by block as it relates to this item on the ordinance, and also looking at the referral that was given, the changes that we promoted already to city council and go as it relates. Yes, that. The proponents of the evidence, all that stuff.
Council request for council direction here.
Oh, the one you were reading from? Yeah, remember, based on the recommendation of the Allison Bernstein as chair made. And I think that we can come back in the next meeting and say, as it relates to policy, this is what they recommend, this is what the ordinance says, we agree with that, this can be added, none of that, and move on to the next one. What do you think, Mr. Norris?
I agree.
Oh my God! Can we get a recording of that?
I only think, at the risk of,
Running out of time.
running into the commission, against the, just taking you off. I just have to urge you all, just move
Yes.
as fast as you can.
Yes.
Because the time is gonna go fast, and I would urge you all to meet at least twice a week. You might have to have a long Saturday meeting, but you have quite a bit of work to do.
Yeah.
Now, you have exhausted, the, comments about what went into the ballot measure.
Yeah.
I think at this point, we just need to move forward in terms of what we want to do.
Right.
And put the politics
Mhm.
formally
Absolutely.
aside.
So I'll send a recap email of what we just said here,
Mhm.
so everybody has it, and
Okay.
instructions to come to the next meeting. Are we gonna do a little poll for this, or what are we doing?
Well, you all, it's, can we do it tonight? Are we moving?
We can do it tonight.
Let's see what we can do, about setting a next meeting.
Mhm.
Are you moving on to the next agenda item? Are you gonna discuss these issues?
That's what we, yeah.
Okay, so that's,
Timeline.
6, 7, where do you wanna be?
That's good. What about you, Bill?
What was the date? 6, 7?
No, item 6 and 7 on the agenda.
The timeline.
Yeah, we determined a timeline for completion of the work would probably be the second week of,
It's according to referral, it's May. I'll try to find out specifically
Yeah.
when that is, but,
it could be the first week of May,
I don't know when that is.
but it could be the first week of
But
May.
the council may have just kept it open for you, because I know that they.
And we'll have a much better understanding after the 27th meeting.
Yes.
Once we go there and raise hell. Well, no, I don't need to say that.
Mhm.
We go there and explain our position as a subcommittee indirectly.
We just have to keep in mind that we have so much time to get the work done here, and then the full commission has to consider your recommendation. And then it goes to council.
And understand that our recommendations to the full commission
Mhm.
might not be accepted.
But this goes to the full commission, and it went ahead and got on the calendar. I mean, I don't really understand how that even happened.
Well, that's
This was our mandate.
that's outside of our process. You mean what Worthington did, or what
Well,
the ballot measure people?
this ballot measure.
People can vote,
Anybody
people can do
can
that.
do a ballot measure.
As a private citizen.
A democratic
What do you
process.
mean to the PRC?
Yeah, but the PRC was given a mandate,
Yes.
and we didn't do that. Because obviously it wasn't brought to us to do. And the
Yes.
people that's on the PRC went ahead and did this and didn't never include us and tell us or anything.
Yes.
So we're having to play catch up,
Yes.
which is not, I mean, this is not even fair to us
Yeah.
as a PRC.
We can't do anything about that right
No,
now.
we can't, but I mean,
But be aware that once we do this work and we present to the commission, to the full commission,
Right.
it might stop right
it
there.
might stop.
So, it might be that because this is a public meeting, and this, and whatever we generate here is part of a public record.
Right,
It
sure.
might be that as individual, if it doesn't pan out one way or the other, as individuals, we could push for it individually, right? You know, I mean,
In the
but
campaign.
let's not put the horse ahead of the, whatever it is, cart, huh? If it doesn't work, then I mean, we can certainly have a meeting with Linda and I. We can certainly have a meeting with Ben, we can have a meeting with Susan Wainwright, we can have a meeting with Lori Drost, and say, this is what the subcommittee came with, and it was voted down, if it happens.
Right.
There are venues that we can
Okay.
follow, but let's focus on looking at the work, so the completion probably could be, depends, conducive on what happens on the 27th. Even if it happens on the 27th, we can still just work on a counter proposal or changes that we can submit for city council for their own recommendation, and maybe put on the ballot themselves as a countermeasure to whatever this is, right? So that's the scope of the work.
You know, I have a question about the ordinance, because I was looking at the work that they did, and I was looking at some of it, there's a possibility, some of it, not a lot. Why could we not, say, for instance, piggyback on this ordinance here?
You can do what you want.
I mean, that's what I'm thinking, because some of this, when you read it over, we'll continue to do this, there's a possibility that some of it might be able to fit in here, and we might not even need a ballot measure, right?
I think,
We
you're
do.
you're going to need a ballot measure
Okay.
because,
They changed
but you could take that and make a ballot measure proposal out of it.
Yeah,
That's
after
right.
we
But
incorporate,
you do not,
or whatever,
I don't
yeah.
want to get into the politics again, but
Right.
you can't leave this measure from the community group as the
Right.
only item out that you
That's
can.
right.
Exactly,
This
that's
is-
what I'm
This
saying,
is a
yeah.
shot.
That's
So
right.
we're gonna do our part,
Yeah.
and, yeah.
So, I mean, you don't have to figure out 6 now, but maybe
But
you want to set the.
Conducive on the 27th to a possibility of the first week or second week in May.
Mm-hmm.
It would be our tentative time for completing work, right? That's our timeline. Our tentative time for completing work would be the first and the second week of May, right? I know, it's a push.
We'll see if we can,
Get a certain
we can-
definite answer.
we can-
But for the record, that's a tentative, right?
Yeah. The council has until August 10th to take actions on these items. But their last council meeting is in July, so they probably want at least June and part of July to consider these.
So I mean, so we can say maybe by the end of the month of May, depends on what the answers are. But our homework is to look at the ordinance more closely, look at the proposal, and see where we are in terms of the comparative, so when we come in the next meeting, we have, as it relates to this is my opinion, or how say ye, okay, that, we agree with that, we don't agree with that, I think that's great, I think we can put it in and move on to the next one. Next meeting, a meeting schedule,
Terry
I think-
Roberts says he's available if you all are, and you may open up your calendar, thank you very much, for this Wednesday afternoon. What does it look like for, no?
No, I'm good.
Are you?
I have,
And I have a Friday morning,
I can do Thursday, Friday, anytime. But see, Wednesday, late, I mean, I'm dealing with my granddaughter. And she doesn't go home until like 7:30. So I pick her up from school and then,
Wednesday, I have to be out of here no later than 5:30.
you have to be out of here. or it's-
I have the endorsement meeting for 8015 in Auckland City Hall.
Oh,
and I'm the
oh,
board
you said-
member.
Oh, okay. I thought you said earlier you were, never mind. So why don't you guys set your next meeting?
so what?
But I know that Robert said that he was available
Wednesday.
and I think
But
Friday.
he's probably available,
Friday morning.
he's probably available Wednesday 4 to 5, he'd probably be available to that. Are you available when,
A little bit.
You can't.
can you submit information to us and we can
We
record
just
on
do the
Friday?
poll tonight,
Mhm.
get the poll up tonight or tomorrow.
Friday, like I said, Thursday, Friday. I don't think-